Yeah, we're right in the flow of things. So I just pushed the record button. Joel was just giving me a hard time about my love letter to Georgia Tech. Did you know, Joel, that I talked to somebody earlier this week?
That you talked to somebody? No, I just assumed.
Yeah, first off, did you know that I talked to somebody?
You and Eric have so much time to be able to look up these articles. I assumed, no, you didn't have any time to talk to him.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, Eric, how you doing?
Right. Anyway, this person...
There's more. There's more to the story.
You know,
unlike a lot of the other podcasts that have no actual, like, there's like the intro... Right. And then the main body's lacking. So this has a main body. There's actually going to be a point to this story.
Yeah, it does.
All right, let's hit it.
Yeah. This is the wonder of social media. I talked to somebody earlier this week that thought that I was currently working at Georgia Tech. They saw the clip somewhere and they were like, oh, wow, Chris is back at Tech?
Back at Tech.
Done deal.
Nice.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's the sound of Joel Rawlings. Unfortunately, he's back. We've been having a really good time, Eric and I.
I know.
Having nice, mature, respectful conversations on the podcast.
I always drag it down. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Joel's back to drag it down and also drag me down. For some reason, he inspires me to act extremely childish.
Yeah.
And revert to the 14-year-old boy version of myself. But, you know, such is life. We're on our way to setting a viewership record. Eric is here as well from his kitchen in Houston. How are you, Eric?
Well, it's my dining room / office / kitchen / bar. So things are going well.
What do you have stocked in your bar?
Yeah.
Quite a bit of whiskey, a little bit of gin, tequila, vodka, kind of the standards.
Okay. Higher end stuff, or do you have any Badgerland?
Not super crazy.
Right.
No. I do have one bottle. Or actually, I have like about 4 or 5 bottles from Wisconsin.
All right, just checking.
So shout out to Ray Horse. Yeah.
Yeah, low end stuff.
Shout out to Great Lakes.
I got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not a sponsor.
Should be
enough. Wisconsin. We're actually drunk on life here at Jersey Wahoo's headquarters because USA Swimming Club Excellence came out today, and we are a gold medal club. So I can change my intro to saying we're sponsored by Jersey Wahoo's, a gold medal club in Mount Laurel, New Jersey. It's official.
Congratulations!
We
That's
squeaked. Yeah. No thanks.
So
we squeaked in there.
Yeah. So do you get like a plaque or some kind of like certificate?
You get the banner
in the mail. Oh, you probably
I think
an 8.5 by 11 PDF that you get to print out yourself.
We gotta print out those T-shirts with gold medal club logo immediately. Yeah. I'm still such a noob about the Club Excellence program. I don't know anything besides, that it's good.
Nice. I've heard you get some cool stuff.
Yeah, you get.
I think we get more funding. I think but somebody listening to this is going to be so frustrated that I don't know.
You're inside the velvet rope now.
Yeah,
we're a part
of
the juggernaut that is USA Swimming. So.
We're one of the cool teams, and I definitely have never. I just want everybody to know I've never disparaged the Club Excellence program in my life. I think it's wonderful. It's a flawless system with that truly represents what the best clubs are in the United States. And you will not be able to find any recordings or writings anywhere where I've ever said anything bad about the Club Excellence program. I think it's amazing.
So I heard UVA swam Florida. Did that go?
Yeah. Okay. So let's get to the beat of the podcast. We're going to talk about UVA swimming Florida. Then we're going to make Joel teach us what we should do on a flip turn. Eric's going to share a real life experience flipping, and we're going to justify why it's really appropriate to teach all kids to land on their heels when they're doing a turn. Because that's what Eric thinks is right. I don't know if I agree, but we'll get there. But
this is projection right now. Projection. Appreciate it, Chris.
Yeah. First, let's get to this dual meet because this was a bananas dual meet. This was a bananas dual meet, and It got a lot of coverage on SwimSwam, and I think there was some good coverage around it, which I understand is basically because the coaches of these teams really want there to be coverage around it. So they are granting a lot of access and information to SwimSwam, essentially the only news outlet we have in swimming. Apologies to Brett Hawk and Swimming World Magazine, who are now together. But I haven't purposely gotten on Swimming World Magazine in over a decade. I would love to know actually the last time. And I was an original Lane 9 reader. That's a reference for everybody.
That's a throwback.
40 and up. Anyway, this dual meet. Eric, since you definitely out of the three of us consumed the most out of this dual meet, just give us your brief impressions, and then we're going to use that as a segue into some kind of conversation about this.
Well, I mean, the meet went the way that one would expect. The women won from UVA.
UVA women.
Yep, the UVA women won. The Florida men won. Some fantastic in-season, unsuited results out of UVA women specifically. The men did pretty well overall, both teams, but again, there's just a matter of firepower. In all honesty, there wasn't a ton in terms of like referring to other times for the Florida women's. And I tried to do a little bit of a dive into see what people were at, but there's just so much with regards to how the women did from Virginia that it really was kind of their show, and everybody else was along for the ride. So long story short, we heard a lot from the UVA staff and how this defied expectations, went well beyond what they had hoped for, and looking forward to what's coming up next for them, because their next dual meet is actually against UT. So they have a 2-day dual meet, both programs.
That's probably not going to be very exciting.
Probably not at all.
No.
So that'll be the short of it now. I have a bunch of other stuff that I looked at, consumed, and thought about that I can share once you guys have your chance to ramble.
Well, I mean, so I have to say my impressions of this are colored by my professional jealousy for Todd DeSorbo. Once upon a time, we were both toiling assistant coaches at bottom half of ACC schools. And since then, he has taken quite a rise in his coaching career. So, it almost at sometimes makes it hard for me to praise UVA. But I'm going to go ahead and do that anyway. I think what he's doing right now is actually really, really moving culture in a positive way in college swimming. I think that you can see a thread that definitely started when he was at NC State. They definitely put a high priority on swimming fast throughout the year. It feels like an evolution of that, but it also feels like an evolution out of it, because I see that other teams that they're competing against also feel that they need to swim fast basically at all times to sort of compete with UVA. And especially even on the women's side, I think that is sort of a more dramatic culture shift. And it's so far from where I think things were maybe even 15 years ago in college swimming. And I just view it as a positive on a number of levels. I think it's a positive for kids that they get multiple opportunities instead of having everything funneled down. Of course, you're going to have funneled down pressure on one meet, but sort of wrapping your mind around the challenge of being fast at various junctures, I think does sort of diffuse a little of that pressure a bit. And just from a pure entertainment value, it's more fun to follow these meets. I've always talked to non-swimming people about this concept where, teams will just not really try to be anywhere near their best, or we're trying not to be near their best in a meet. It's like, imagine a college football game where, Texas loses to, I don't know,
anybody and everybody,
anybody, and they just go like, well, we didn't wear our like best uniforms for the game, and we're training really hard right now, so we're trying to be good at the Big 12 championship game. We don't really care about how we do in this. Like, who would want to pay to watch that? Who would care? Like, if you don't, as a team, an athlete, like really care and want to be competitive in the thing that you're doing, why should anybody else care? What do you think, Joel?
I think you're right. I think one thing Eric kind of missed a little bit was the things that. Well, no,
good. Let's clear up Eric's deficits
we're not
for
going
once.
All of them. I'm just
I cut my half hour short.
When he
see if you can get your face in frame while you say this, because you're falling out of the video frame.
So anyhow, when Eric brought up the idea, like some things that went as expected, one of them was like Florida, winning the 1,000 on both sides, even though obviously the women at UVA are really strong. I mean, Florida still won the 1,000, which kind of, in my mind, kind of goes kind of according to how a book would be written, and UVA more of the sprint, but also UVA ended up, doing really well in the 500. What I was kind of surprised by was how UVA like turned off scoring after the 100 fly on the women's side. I obviously knew UVA women were exceptional. I didn't realize it was that much of a disparity where they just stopped, everyone went exhibition after that. Right. Coming out of the gate, like I think they were 1, 2, 3 in the 200 medley. Obviously, you only scored 2, but just again the depth that they have. But I think you're absolutely right as far as like changing the script a little bit and making, more entertainment value. I mean, it's more exciting. I mean, we're talking about a dual meet. That's something that really never happened before, especially early season. Everyone's like, oh, we're still got our aerobic base going on. We're doing X, Y, Z. Don't expect much, and we're breaking people down. But they're swimming fast already. And so just from a kid standpoint, student athlete, I mean, these meets are got to be fun to be at. The electricity of swimming Florida, the electricity of going to swim Texas, swimming these amazing teams like this is going to bring out the best. You got coaches that are excited about being there, enthused. It's not like, we just got off the bus after 8 hours. Let's do the best we can. It's kind of like putting money into swimming where it used to always be the afterthought. Like we literally would get off of a bus and then you're supposed to perform and you're beat down from the season. And like you said, there really wasn't expectations to swim fast, much like, again, if you're watching college football, like, well, we were lifting heavy for the past month, so we're really not going to be doing very well. Like, why would you do that then, And so it is amazing how that it is swimming fast. And again, part of it too is, when you always look at the D1 as the business, and this is something that's going to attract elite level talent. Google, they're putting slides and all these other fun things and free meals into their things because they want the best talent to come work for Google versus Apple versus whatever. The same thing here is like if you're a kid looking at results and you're seeing all these fast swims and you're seeing a meet like this, you want to be a part of it, and it just builds and builds and builds.
Right.
Fast swimming is going to attract fast swimming. And it's, again, like I said, it's a fun environment. And so I know the old guard is always like, well, we'll just see what happens. You're stunting. It's like, well, this is kind of, in a sense, the end of their careers. Some are going to go on for another 8 years. This is 4 years. Now is the time, as DeSorbo has been saying, of sharpening the knife. The interesting thing from my perspective is just, again, how sharp can you make it, keep it, without like eventually over sharpening it? It becomes brittle in a sense, where you kind of that loading and unloading or pulsing kind of different energy systems a little bit and getting that balance just right. And so I'm always interested in seeing more of what they do beyond the marketing videos and the infomercials that they put up as far as, hey, we're climbing a rope, we're doing a 25, and now we're getting some protein shakes. How great of a day. It's like, obviously they're doing more than that. And that'd be interesting to see what else they're doing.
Yeah, and I think as you were saying that stuff about sharpening the knife, and then I'll get back to Eric, was making me think, and I was thinking this out loud even as I was making my point. I can see there's too much of this going wrong. Like I can see, this like emphasis on let's, swim pretty fast all the time, going to like the burden of expectations on an October dual meet being too close to, the burden of expectations that you have. And then the pressure is just too unrelenting for everybody involved and really damaging psychologically. Like, I can absolutely see that happening. So I guess that's to say, I would love to get more insight too, because I hope that there's some thought being given to, like, what could the negative consequences of this wonderful change be, right? And how do we sort of prevent and have an idea of when is too much. And I do want to, when is too much, I also want to correct myself on my Texas football point. Eric, you did bring up in the intro that this was an unsuited dual meet. And I think probably a lot of people associate, in-season fast performance with suiting up. And they're, I don't really want to have that debate here on this podcast, because I think it's not that interesting, the debate whether you wear a fast suit or not. And, I don't want to hurt Speedo's feelings, who obviously want to sell as many of those fast suits as possible, but like I think I just bring it up because I do think it was an important piece of the reporting of what was going on. Just probably not worth discussing that much. So Eric, you went even deeper. You did something that, Joel and I just weren't willing to do. And you actually listened to Todd DeSorbo
I listened
on a
to
podcast.
It as well. Eric,
okay.
Don't carve some time out.
Yeah, of course. I listened to it too. I don't know what I was saying there. We all listened to it. So, but Eric, why don't you tell me what you heard when you listened to it?
The biggest thing was listening to his messaging about the way that they're training. Yet there are some nuggets in there that are really, really interesting that any coach, new or old, can really garner from what he's doing. And just that it is an experiment and that he doesn't have all the answers, and that what he's doing is trying to find the balance between too much racing and speed, or it's like protecting speed, as he put it, like not doing any speed work all year and just doing a bunch of base work to build the cup, as you will, before you fill the cup. And talking about that, the one thing that I found interesting that you just brought up, and wondering what the messaging is throughout day by day, week by week, what words are he using? What words is he using? Because it's really important between, can and will and must and need. Like, when you start using absolutes, that can really make these things difficult. And if he's not using those absolutes as you must go 21-9 in a 50 fly split in a Tudor medley, it's just, let's see what you can do. I think you can do this. Like, leave it open-ended, right. And then it's like there's that belief in the athlete. And that's kind of what I got a lot from him in that moment. And then aside from the fact that it was brought to you by Triton, where about every...
Hey, they don't need any advertisement on this podcast. They got their money's worth.
Brought to you by Triton, where... and he did talk a lot about data collection. He talked about some of the things that are most important. One thing he looks at every day is push-off power and velocity off the wall at short course. Why wouldn't you? And he's just taking it another step and having a data point as far as what the athletes have on any given day. Aside from that part, the one thing I did find interesting about the result itself is some of the things that are coming through. And one is this going to be I wouldn't say resurrection of a career, but the resurrection of the trajectory of an athlete in Claire Tuggle. So anybody who's been a swim nerd the last 5, 6, 7 years, she was an animal in the age group division. And then there was just this flattening out. I don't want to get into details in her life because I don't know her. I don't know what's going on. I don't have all of the story. But she's a freshman at UVA right now. And she's, looking at some of the times that are USA Swimming, and she's approaching some of those best times. Times that she hasn't touched in 5+ years. So seeing what this change of landscape for somebody like that will do for them. The other thing, too, is that the women, by and large, had a much better job of splitting in deltas between front half and back half than most of the men. So that could be a number of reasons. but you're seeing an adaptation that the women are able to handle with the training right now than maybe the men. And we're talking about some of the best swimmers of all time on the women's side that they're comparing to, which is kind of difficult. The best ones on UVA on the men's side doing a better job overall splitting, but just the men not being there. And then I got into their roster a bit, and it's like they got a lot of East Coast kids. They got a couple of kids from Georgia, but I don't know if they're gonna be able to pull kids from the West Coast. They don't have anybody from Texas, and Texas has got a lot of fast swimmers in the high school ranks, given how the structure of their high school swimming is. So it'll be interesting to see how this continues with the men, because the men didn't swim slow. Like, it's not like they were terrible. They won a handful of events. They got some really great swims, but it's just not the level of the women's side, and it's hard to compare when you have Olympic medalists on one half of your combined program, that are already there. So,
yeah. I mean, like I saw, for instance, their men, especially if you were to make a strength of the UVA men's team, it would be in sprinting. But then, Florida, I think for the last since I've been following them, Florida always has one elite 50 free guy. Like, they always have one kind of trump card 50 free guy, and they got Josh Liendo, who's a world-class 50 freestyler, on the team as a freshman this year. So they sort of nullified UVA's biggest strength in this meet, and that was, more than anything, I think, what gave them a clear advantage in the men's side of this meet. There was a discussion on here, and I'm actually curious to get Joel's opinion on it, that you mentioned in our text, Eric. And there's a little bit of discussion, I think specifically with regards to Matt King and 100 free long course. I think if people are picking nits on DeSorbo, they're probably going, well, the international long course results from last summer were not quite up to the same standard, because the standard in college swimming was so impossibly high how well they did, right? It's almost like anything he did was not going to be as good at that. But two, when you're talking about what's the secret sauce for him, I keep on hearing all these things that I just think offer such a comparative advantage in short course swimming. And I actually bring it up not as a criticism. I just think maybe we should just recognize that he's innovating on stuff that has a bigger impact in short course swimming. And so it's not going to give him the swimmers that he coaches as big of an advantage in long course season. But I mean, what do you think, Joel?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good points you guys brought up. Well, I think with speaking to that, I mean, one of the things you mentioned was he's testing their power off the walls, and obviously that's a short course topic, really, more than anything. The breakout speed, getting to those first even 3-4 hand hits, that's everything. I mean, if you've got that, then it's hard to lose a race. And so by really making that the top priority, I think that's kind of the Moneyball aspect, or the market inequity is you go after that hard, and that's we've seen that in NCAA's and things. Their breakouts were pretty solid, obviously very solid in their terms of getting into and out of the walls, because that's everything that it is. And so I think that's the thing where it's not as big of a deal when obviously it's always a big deal, but relatively speaking, in the world of elite level swimming like that, I don't, in a long course meet or 800, sure, the walls are important, but not as critical as in a short course. You have one turn, that's it, and it has to be on. You miss the turn, you're off. And so that's the thing that's amazing, is how they're always on like that. And a couple of things I was thinking about was when you mentioned the pressure on these kids. I mean, you think about basketball teams like University of Kentucky basketball. The pressure's on the same kids. It's the same, 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds that these kids are. But this, I mean, the women are going in, they knew they're going to win the meet. It's just them racing them. And so it's not about the times. And that's the nice thing, again, you see DeSorbo making sure they understand that. Is it's just about racing, having fun racing. And I think getting that in practice. We're racing in practice. We're racing each other. You're racing the best of the best every day. And now you're in a meet, and there happens to be another team while you're racing the best of the best, And so you can have a lot of fun swimming that and not have the pressure. and then kind of ramp up the pressure. And like he said in the interview that I did listen to, was that it was kind of taking pressure off of the bigger meat of the Olympics, which is the first time I've ever heard a college coach really bring that up, especially at this point in the year. So I thought that was pretty cool. One earnest question I have, though, is when Eric brought up, as far as recruiting the West Coast, is that something you really need? Especially if you're Virginia, because, after found out about the Wahoos being a gold medal team, if you look on that list of 20.
Thank you.
All of them, not all of them, it's a little hyperbole there, but the majority of them are East Coast teams. There's a team in California, I believe. There's a couple of teams, but as far as like from Mississippi over, that's the bulk of the top 20, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at the list as you bring that up, Joel. There's not, unless I'm getting my, I'm getting my LSCs. Oh, sorry. There's Lakeside Aquatic Club. So the North Texas is in here.
Right.
There's one team from the state of Texas.
Yeah.
There's two from California.
Yeah.
And if you start down the line, it's North Carolina, California, Potomac Valley, which is Washington, D.C., Indiana, which some people count as the eastern part of the United States, I guess.
Well, again, just everything from
me.
On
My
this side of the
conversation was referring to the men's team.
Yeah, no, I'm not knocking what you're saying.
Reference to being able to get recruits from the entire western part of the United States.
Get your comfort blanket.
Take it down a notch.
We weren't coming at you. I was just saying what I find interesting is, again, it's the eastern portion of the country really has these. And again, I'm just using that as an indicator of age group swimming and what you're recruiting through. Obviously, you have international you need to get in getting key kids out of California and Texas. But if they can just lock down North Carolina, that's it. You're going to be a pretty solid team doing that. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Just looking, at the two topics we talked about in the text string, all of a sudden thinking about as far as recruiting, they've got a nice advantage with that. But one of the things that's interesting is also, listening to that whole Tritonwear infomercial. And that's the thing is it's an infomercial. So you've got to take little bits and pieces out of it as far as like what you can get. It's like watching, the QVC or something like that. But basically what I think is interesting is, again, just finally getting wearable technology into the pool, and not just speaking about that, there's Whoop bands. I know some kids like Wahoos, I think, probably have those too. I mean, it's accessible technology now. And I think for so many years, all of us coaches, we're just kind of having to guess, you write up your season plan. This is a season plan of a generic swimmer that I think would do well. And then each individual swimmer trying to fit within that plan. And it's always the elite coaches were the people that could kind of see on a day-to-day basis what their group needs, then also what each individual needs. And I think this helps also kind of give some numbers to that. And looking at power and things like that, I think is probably a pretty good indicator too of seeing, like, when you're pushing a little too much, all of a sudden those power numbers will probably drop off quicker than anything. And so, I think it's one of those, I'm sure the price will keep coming down and more teams get into it. But that's, I think, again, one of the ways you can just start individualizing it. And again, a guy like an Eddie Reese or something like that who's been doing this so long, I'm sure a guy just walks in, he's like, nah, take a day off, just because he knows. And now you've got actual numbers to back it up. I think also it can be a crutch, much like they're talking about the suits, where all of a sudden, I can't swim fast if I'm not suited up. And the same thing here, where all of a sudden it's like, well, the Whoop band or the Tritonwear or whatever says that today's not a good day to train, so I'm going to back up. It's like, well, sometimes those wearables are wrong too. So, I mean, I think there's good and bad that can come from it. But I think right now, kind of like what Eric was saying earlier about, is like kind of, keeping it going, keeping it having fun, keeping it fast. I think that's one of the keys that's really going to help when you have a bigger program too.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm terrified to ask, but do you have anything to add, Eric, on the bottom of that?
No, I mean, I guess the biggest thing is that I took away from that podcast, and Joel just mentioned it, was taking the pressure off the Olympics, especially for the women's team, and using the college season as a distraction from that type of thinking. And it really makes a lot of sense when, as soon as you go pro, that's your focus. That's everything. And it's not fair to some of these athletes that are in that situation yet to have to think about that 24/7. So it really is great. And it seems to me that he's definitely not old school, but just in terms of like that old school, not necessarily new school, just different. In terms of thinking about like, we've got a couple more months to get ready. Like he's not putting a ton of weight in the fact that they've got to bring it back up and bring it back down. If we don't get this kind of volume metric, then we're going to be, SOL. It's like, it's fine. Like everything's going to be okay as long as we're in the right place mentally and we're having fun and we're just consistently trying to get better every day. Then that stuff will take care of itself, just as long as you're being attentive to the programming you're doing and not necessarily get caught up in doing, a lot of volume. And he did speak to that. He's thrown out practice. He's stopped sets. He's like, a set's going really well. They do more rounds of it, and he drops something later. You come back to it. So there just seems to be a lot more confidence in just going with what's working and then being okay with not sticking to the plan if the plan isn't working in the moment. So
yeah,
it's good stuff that every coach needs to hear and understand, and just be okay with sometimes things aren't going to work out right away. Just keep moving.
Also be okay if you're not as good as Todd DeSorbo. Doing that,
just get used to the idea that you might not be at that level.
You might. Okay, let's talk about turns. You guys know that I was quite fired up a couple weeks ago. We exchanged a lot of text messages. Accusations were made, okay? Many of them unfair, I think, at certain people. I don't think we need to get into all the details of it. But I ended up making a video and quickly got a very helpful comment from somebody. I got some input from the unofficial fourth member of the podcast who can actually manage to show up to record a podcast, Trevor Gray. And I don't know if Trevor's going to enjoy that shout out as much as his other shout outs, but too bad.
No lies. We're told.
Where are we at, Joel? Like, what's going on with people doing turns and, that part of their leg/foot?
I still think, as far as freestyle turns, I've always liked Lochte freestyle turn. I always thought that was really exemplifies
what is that?
All that. Well, I was kind of get to that point, but geez, I like how you don't rush Eric. I get rushed. What's the deal with this, huh? So as you get into the wall, the thing that when the classic boomer kind of breakdown of things was you got your center of buoyancy in your lungs and you got your center of mass into the hips, and you just kind of trying to get the center of buoyancy out of the way of the center of mass. And so as Lochte would get into the wall, he'd start pressuring his chest down into the water from the sternum. And once you do that, now the center of mass is still driving into the wall, and then the center of buoyancy becomes like that axis of rotation. So they drive the chin in. So it's like first the chest goes down, chin goes in, and now the center of mass is going to start to go right over the top.
Oh, we lost Joel in the middle of his point.
He'll come back. He'll come back, I swear. We'll let him finish when he comes back. So he was referring to just the entire mechanics of the flip turn. I guess we can kind of touch a little bit on what was going on in terms of your conversation in the heels and the heels dropping of the wall.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with him with that whole part. I have spent a lot of time, I think, when I'm teaching kids how to turn, my entire focus is on what he's describing, on taking that center of buoyancy and essentially getting it out of the way. And I probably, there you are.
I left it at a cliffhanger. Now you guys are like, what?
Yeah.
What?
We're like, what's next?
Yeah.
Keep going.
So as the center mass rolls over the top, you just bring the legs in. So you kind of shorten that line up from the legs in, and so you get a faster rotation. And so I think a lot of times people are into going up, spinning, and so it looks fast, but it's just all the momentum from the swim has gone into rotation rather than still carrying momentum into the wall. So like Boomer used to call it a semi-jackknifing. And so it still kind of keeps on traveling down the highway. The idea is that you're getting the momentum going into the wall now, and then it kind of gets to the part we were talking about, like, do you let the heels land on? So it's not like you're letting them slide down the wall. It's more like you're jumping. So you're driving your legs into the wall. And so, you know, after that, I never really talked about it. I just kind of let the kids kind of do their thing and let that take over. Because I thought if they're trying to drive into their heels, then you get kids stuck on the wall. It was my theory on it. But then, as you pointed out, you know, you see a lot of times with people in a slam dunk competition or something, they're driving their heel down to build up potential energy, and kind of like that energy gets stored and then it's released pretty explosively. And so I always thought just with the arch, you know, the ball of the foot hitting and then using the kind of the arch of the foot like as a spring to go into the power off of the wall. And so that's why I always taught that. But so what was your thought then?
Well,
hopefully you can edit
think,
out the part where I dropped out, so maybe it's a little more cohesive, but maybe not.
No,
that's all right.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. Never mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most helpful comment that I got here was from commenter Shelby, and I heard this from Trevor as well. He sent me a video that I think everybody should watch. It's linked in the comment under the original video. It's somebody doing a 47-inch vertical leap, and I think you should watch it for no other reason than if you watch it in quarter speed like I did, it looks like as if he levitates.
Yeah.
You know, for a moment. Like
47 is insane. Holy cow.
Yeah, right. Like an elite athlete vertical leap, I remember being like 39, 40 inches.
Yeah.
We're talking about, you know, like 20% better than that. Right? Like It completely blows my mind. But anyway, watching this guy do it, you can see before he's about to make the jump, you know, like he's just standing on the ground, right? His heels are off the ground. But in order to make the jump, he lifts his heels and then essentially they tap and then everything like explodes off from there. And there's a term for this that I learned through him and Trevor, a stretch shortening cycle that's going on with the Achilles tendon. You know, so I actually don't know enough. And now I'm going to reveal my ignorance again. I don't know enough about physiology to know which part is the stretching of the Achilles tendon. I'm guessing it's when your heel comes in, right? Then the Achilles tendon is stretching and then it shortens and releases, as you say, sort of, Joel, that potential energy. Just the change in shape of the Achilles tendon essentially creates that. So, you know, like, yeah, I guess if you pay attention to what you're doing on the turn and you notice that you're actively working against your Achilles tendon stretching after your foot, like you're trying to keep it just like stiff so that, you know, you can't engage that cycle. Yeah, you're probably missing out on a lot of power in terms of how you push off on the wall. But, you know, probably a lot of people are naturally doing this right. It would be my guess. Eric, what did you find when you went into the pool yourself, as you so urged me to do? And, you know, like, yeah. I think you said something like, if you don't want to try this by yourself, you can't make a video about it, which I don't think is fair.
Which you loathe.
I think you criticized your weight too. That was the worst part.
Yeah, he said, hey.
Yeah,
there was a little bit of shaming going on.
Yeah, it was a lot of
shaming. Yeah, get into the pool. Like, it was really hard, Eric.
Yeah, no. So I actually actively tried to put my heels on the wall, and that hurt my right ankle. It is such an awkward place, regardless of where you are within the turn. You have to be so tight to the wall to be able to like actively get your heels on the wall and that just be the activity. But to try to do the stretch situation and try to get your heels all the way down, my left ankle is a little bit better than my right. But in any event, you really can feel, if you're paying attention to it, you feel the heel drop. You know, depending upon your mobility is whether or not it drops fully. And you kind of, I could tell that my left heel was grazing the wall ever so slightly. So there was a little bit more of a drop there than maybe on the right side. And part of it is the rotation of my turn is just a bit skewed to the left, but just trying to go straight over. I noticed that I did, after I was doing more and more of the turn, there is a bit of a resistance to allow the heels to drop completely, just from a standpoint of the awkward nature of the angles of your hips to your femur through your knee, and your knee through, lower bones in your legs and into your ankle, and your contact points being through the walls of your feet. You have certain things that you instinctually do to avoid injury. Now, there are some kids that may actively just like be so rigid, but you can see that there's gonna get like, they might make it to the flags, right? It's gonna be a very awkward push. They might make it to the flags, but no, I did notice, I didn't necessarily feel the stretch through my Achilles, but I could feel like essentially that loading in my arch and in my foot itself. And when you're connecting with it well, you don't really feel a lot. Like, it's just, there's just almost like a disappearance of all this tension, and you notice your velocity coming off the wall. So at the same time, there were some that weren't necessarily as good as others. I noticed more the velocity than maybe the unloading of the jump itself. But yeah, I think it's, what you talked about with that 47-inch vertical is that there was a loading of it and then that springboard off. I did some box jumps the next day, just trying to see what I would feel my heels do within my shoes, and just seeing, like, as I was going through it, there almost was a steps within the actual movement itself, like my hips dropping, and then as I was going through that, almost like there was a heel lift, and then there was a continuation upwards. But I don't have a 47-inch vertical. It's probably like,
not yet. Not with that attitude, you won't, Eric.
Yeah, but it is interesting to actually go through and think about the process of the flip and how you're trying to place your feet and what is going to be that most explosive moment. And it makes sense that Todd DeStorbo, sponsored by Tritonwear, would do such a thing, like paying attention to that velocity off the wall, and if there are problems, trying to reverse engineer back to that contact point. Obviously, streamline in scare quotes is important, only from the standpoint of hydrodynamics and not having as much resistance, but going all the way back to what's happening at the wall with the hips and the knees and the ankles and all the angles and what's going on through the push.
I'm going to ignore your jab about streamlines because, I think I want to keep things civil here on the podcast. But you did bring up a point that I would like to hear a little bit more about, and that is, I think you talked about mobility allowing. Right. And mobility is an issue here, right? In terms of, like, most people are going to land on the ball of their foot, and the momentum of what they're doing will probably carry their heels into the water if their mobility will allow it. And as you said that, I was just thinking about the fact that, like, people will say, like, oh, like, this person has really mobile ankles, but that's not an omnidirectional mobility in most cases, right? Most fast swimmers, they have a lot of ankle mobility in the opposite direction, right? With their feet pointed. Yeah. We're talking about the reverse of flexion, of this. And I'd be really interested to see whether there's, like, a lot of really good dolphin kickers out there who maybe can't push off the wall that well, and it's limiting the potential of what they can do with their dolphin kick, because one of the points I made in the video that I think is worth repeating hundreds of times, because there seem to be a lot of people in swimming circles who don't understand it. Like, you don't generate additional velocity by dolphin kicking. You just maintain more speed from whatever you pushed off the wall at. So I'm wondering if there's a lot of people out there with a lot of feet pointing ankle mobility who maybe can't get can't load fully into that push off, and it's limiting how much they can use that strength.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a lot of it has to do with that, the mobility, or at least when it comes to that flexion and having really tight Achilles tendons. Like the old school calf stretch might actually be not that bad of a thing to do every now and then, so you can make sure that you're able to get a little bit better movement, toes towards your nose than maybe toes away from your nose. And but yeah, it is interesting to actually get in the water and think about the movements as they're happening, because if you've done it enough times, you start thinking about actually more so the approach into it. So when Joel talked about, buoyancy and the shift of the hips straight over the top, so everything is moving in a fluid motion towards that endpoint, which is getting the feet to the wall. And then, like, everything that goes into it, there's all these weird, like, almost instinctual things that are happening in terms of placing the feet on the wall, where they actually are relative to the knees and the hips, and when it's a good push, trying to recognize where they are in that moment, which not a lot of younger kids may know or know how to do. So I think the biggest thing is, for any coaches are listening, or any athletes that are thinking about doing this, it just spend some time in an open warm-up format. Give the kids 10 minutes to just play with the turns. What do you feel? Are there moments where there's a stretch? Like you said, maybe it's okay to just say, just try to get your heels to the wall. What happens? How do you, what does that make you feel? Is it super uncomfortable? Like with me, my 41-year-old right ankle was like, this is stupid. But the reality is it's going to take a bit of experimentation and an open mind by athletes and coaches, and just seeing where it goes.
Yeah. Sorry, Joel, I muted you because of clanging plates in the background. But do you have anything to add off the bottom?
No, we're good. Right. As soon as Eric said boxed lunches, I just started getting hungry, and I just kind of it's box
jumps. Box jumps.
All right. Yeah. Well, I was thinking box lunches, so I kind of tuned out. I'm sorry.
Anyway, we're gonna get you to your turkey club as soon as possible.
Awesome.
Here. But I just a couple things, news stories I wanted to comment on quickly at the end of this. The first one was earlier this week. It was announced that Fred Phelps, who's Michael Phelps's father, had passed away. And I just want to bring this up because in reading the very brief article that I read about it, I learned something new about Michael Phelps that I didn't know. The part of the story that I had always heard that he was estranged from his father. I mean, very famously, I guess if you thought about it for a few seconds, like at all the swim meets, you got those shots of his mom in the stands. His mom was famous enough when he was swimming, I think, to get her own commercials and like have her own sort of advertising career. And his sisters were often there as well. And his father was conspicuously absent. And I think there was some ink spilled at the time about the nature of that relationship. What I learned that I didn't know was that partly stemming from the therapy that Michael got after his DUI arrest, he had made an effort to reconcile with his father, and it sounds like his father had as well. And I don't know, the story about it really touched me as somebody who, I'm around the same age as Michael. Most listeners of the podcast know that my mother passed away 5 years ago. It makes you think a lot about all the things that you've left unsaid and all the sort of pieces of a relationship you've left unresolved. And it actually made me really happy for Michael in that moment that I know that's a weird thing to say when your parent passes away, but I'm happy for him that he was able to get to a different place in a relationship with his father. And I think, like, honestly, just as a guy, and I some of the demographics on this audience, I do know we have a lot of male listeners. I know from talking to my guy friends, most of us are probably not as close with our dad as we are with our mom. So there's a really relatable piece to this. And if your dad's out there and he's still alive, I think there's still time for you to do something like Michael did. And then the second one was Pernille Blume, Danish Olympic champion in 50 free, retired. She had been taking some time off intermittently, even between 2016 Olympics and the 2020 Olympics that were contested in 2021. I always find it so confusing when that's in articles, but I want to mention it more than anything because I think it's worth revisiting that a story that was well covered within Denmark, but not necessarily outside of Denmark, was that she came extremely close to quitting swimming 6 months before she won Olympic gold. I can remember being in the country and having people be like, well, she's done. Like, this is it. She's through. And, it's sad because she still had some potential left in her career. Like, it's a story we've probably all seen a lot of times. And, I think there's no shame in quitting if you get to a point where swimming doesn't work for you. And I think she's probably at that point now, obviously, for retiring. But I think there's an uplifting piece to this as well, where, sometimes we're in the sort of lowest valley or what we perceive to be the lowest valley of what we're doing. And the greatest peak is, just around the corner. And I certainly was for her. So I wish her well in her life and career. And I wish everybody who's probably trying to make their own decision about what they want to do next the same. Guys, thanks so much for listening. Joel and Eric, thank you for being here. All the obligatory plugs, like, subscribe this post. I have started, as of last week, putting in the notes timestamps so you actually know what we're talking about at what juncture in there, in case you're somebody who really doesn't want to listen to a bunch of guys talk about heels for an inordinate amount of time. You actually have the option to do that. I may even do it at the time of uploading. We'll see. Probably not. I'll probably do it the next day, so you can wait.
Baby steps. Baby steps.
We're on Spotify now. We are on iTunes and we're on Spotify. The Swim Brief, you can find us there. Very exciting. We're on a whole new platform. Probably has something to do with us reaching a new listenership goal. So thank you to all those people. If you want positive psychology content, Instagram, ChrisD_coach.com, Chris DeSantis Coaching on Facebook, ChrisDCoach.com. If you want to read some of my old blogs or just listen to the podcast, you're an old person like my dad, and that's the only way you can figure out to listen to the podcast, because what's this app thing on my phone? That would be your way to do that. And once again, thank you, and we will see you guys again next week.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks.